Welcome to a quick little Nerds and Friends Quick Draw Questions, our new series. I wanted to do one today with you, Will, because as you can tell from my shirt, I went and saw the Barbie movie today, and it was awesome. Much better than a movie
Oh,
based on a toy line has any right to be. It was actually really good. Yeah,
sounds like Lego movie, kind of.
yeah, exactly. That's actually the first movie that came to mind as I was watching the Barbie movie for similarities was actually the first Matrix movie.
Really?
Yeah, like I mean, they're very different, but a lot of the same. I don't know, like it just that there. I mean, there was a few scenes that directly referenced it, but just overall, just the amount of like thought and introspection that went into the movie. Like I feel like what the Matrix was to the action genre is what the Barbie movie is to kind of just like a very weird comedy, and it very much like I love when movies and shows are just like, we know
Hmm.
what we want to be and we're not going to try to be anything else. And it
Oh
just
yeah.
did its own thing and it was fucking awesome and I loved it. So I was blown away by how good it was. And I actually think it was better than Oppenheimer. I did the
That was
Barbenheimer
gonna be
double
my next
feature.
question. Yeah, is like of the big Barbenheimer duel, which product first launched in Japan was your favorite?
Oh God! Oh Jesus Christ! Well, that was a very uniquely phrased question, but so I didn't do the Barbenheimer same day double feature because I do not have the attention span for two movies at once. But
That's
I saw
entirely
Oppenheimer.
fair.
Yeah, I saw Oppenheimer Monday, and it was excellent. Very good. I'd say it's my third favorite Christopher Nolan movie, and I've seen all of his movies except for Following and Insomnia. So
Mm.
take that with that grain of salt. But I thought Oppenheimer was very, very good. I liked it a lot. And then when I saw Barbie, I just wanted to be honest, I wanted to jump on board the double feature Barbenheimer hashtag whatever. Because I never grew up playing Barbie, so I was concerned going in that there'd be lots
Mhm.
of references to like toy materials or like backstory on the packages that I wouldn't get. And that wasn't I mean, I'm sure there were a few references that might have gone over my head, but I was blown away by how good the movie was. And the reason I think it's better than Oppenheimer is that Oppenheimer had a very meaty subject matter. You
Mhm.
have this guy, he's got a bunch of stuff going on, and then there's the whole Manhattan Project and how it impacted humanity. Like there was a lot there to work with, and Christopher Nolan did an exceptionally good job. I think there are very few filmmakers who could have taken that story and told it better than Nolan. But
Yeah.
with Barbie, it's like you have yeah, it's a kind of a cultural pillar is the Barbie toy line, but there's no cohesive story there. Like there's just a lot of very big, nebulous, important but abstract ideas on toys and like a body image and feminism for women and like gender roles in society, like a lot of really big topics. So condensing that into a cohesive movie and commenting on them in a way that was very nuanced, very
Mhm.
poignant, very well done, and also fun. Like I feel like Greta Gerwig did a lot more heavy lifting as a storyteller visually, with co-writing and directing that movie than Christopher Nolan did writing and directing Oppenheimer. So that's kind of my long thing. But it's funny now.
Mhm.
Our quick draw questions are going to be much shorter than that explanation. But I was thinking today as we were hopping on a Zoom call for something else. Um, what if we did? I wanted to ask you
Mhm.
uh, one toy line from your childhood. If you could tell a very original and interesting movie about the toy line that was very meta, or like what would you do? Which
Oh.
toy line? Because like not something like Transformers or GI Joe where there is already an
Mhm.
established plot and narrative, but like if you had to do something like Barbie, like what would you tackle?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of like what toys did I even have growing up? Because I had like I did have some GI Joes. I had some like Bionicles, and those have a
Those
very
they're like a Lego offshoot, right? Bionicles.
uh I don't know if it's actually Lego that owns it.
They came in like the little
But
Pringles cans, right? They
yeah,
yes,
exactly.
those
Yeah.
were cool. They had a
Mhm.
storyline, didn't they? Kind of, or characters at
They
least,
allegedly, I
allegedly.
think yeah, like there was definitely some lore there, but despite my best efforts as a child, I never seemed to actually figure out what it was.
Those
Um,
things were cool though. I love how they kind of had
mm,
like the flat mass and like different weapons and stuff. They were very creatively designed. I remember those.
oh yeah, that would definitely be an interesting product to actually see get a movie. But I think they've had a couple of animated shows. So
Okay.
other than that, they're like trying to think of most of the big toys that I had growing up. Like I was born in 1990. Most of like the core toys that I had were from like animated shows in the 1980s after like the whole cartoons can't just be selling a product thing got revoked by I think that was like the Reagan administration, if I remember.
Tell me more about that because I was born in '91, so not far
Oh,
from like because I mean I grew up with a lot of toys too where it was late
mhm.
'80s cartoons and it was like so what court thing are you referencing? I don't know
Well,
about this.
oh, well, this is, I don't know if it was actually a legal thing. I'm doing this entirely off the top of my head. I didn't know the question ahead of
I
time.
love that this is becoming instead of a quick draw questions a mini deep dive into
Yeah.
toy lines
Um,
and movies.
yeah, but to my memory at least, there were some like regulations over what your TV shows could be and like how you could advertise things. And a lot of that got like rejected at in like I don't remember if it was before the 80s or during the 80s, but that's what ended up causing a whole bunch of those shows that were basically just selling toys. So you had like G.I. Joe, Transformers, um I'm spacing out on everything else, but like
Well, those are the
you
first two that comes to mind between
yeah.
because Hasbro had those toys based on
Hmm.
shows or vice versa. I don't know which came first, the chicken or the egg, the toy or the show, you know? But because I
Yeah,
know like
it
I grew up with a lot of like Star Wars action figures and
hmm
those obviously came from the movies, but like and then we had Legos,
hmm
but those were only later in my childhood did they start making like Star Wars Legos and stuff. Before the Legos were all just their own
yeah.
little whatevers, with no shows or books or
Hmm.
anything attached to it.
Yeah, but that was basically that became kind of the core for children's animation during the 80s and large parts of the 90s, and why everything had a toy line tied into it,
Mm,
whether that was the X-Men, like Thundercats,
yeah.
uh God, like I've watched so many hours of television and I cannot think of like nearly half of the shows that I've watched anymore. But yeah, I think that would also be kind of why a lot of the my childhood toys like they already have series because like
Right.
that was the entire point of them was to have a series to sell the toys.
Good point.
Um,
I
but yeah,
guess
things like I'm sure you watched like or at least heard of things like SWAT cats, uh,
Swan cats. What?
Beetleborgs,
I've
Power
heard of
Rangers.
Beetleborgs.
Yeah. And I mean, like, Beetleborgs and Power Rangers, those were Saban buying the Japanese television and then making them available to US audience, and then just kind of making the toys around that to sell.
Mm, that makes sense. That's what I was thinking today before this Zoom call was that I was trying to think of what toys from my childhood don't already have their own existing narrative IP.
Yeah.
I could only think of I couldn't even remember the brand of toys. They weren't quite Legos and they weren't quite action figures. I'm trying to remember. It might have been
But like connects or
wasn't Kinex and it wasn't like Playmobil, but they were like these Lego types toys that kind of had like little figures and you could kind of build stuff and move it around. But I'm trying, it was kind of like an off brand one, but they had a few different like themed sets. They had a pirate one that was pretty cool, but like I remember one Christmas I got like an old west one and it had like a bunch of little owls that could clip on the trees and like a little like mine shaft you had to build for these little like
huh.
miners to go through and like thematic like I just liked the visuals of it and like it wasn't quite Legos, but it was that thing where you kind of build it and customize it to some degree.
Mhm.
I really liked it, and so I would want to just take those same aesthetics and tell some kind of wild West story. I don't know, but
I think that's kind of, and the more I think about it, the more I'm thinking that Barbie might be kind of unique in that, where it's this huge IP that doesn't really have any like story around it because it was initially when it was just designed to be a doll to kind of fill a role in the market that was there. But
right. Yeah, because I mean they kind of like satirize that in the movie and
mhm,
stuff, but it was just a really unique take on like uh, this isn't like spoiling anything. You kind of see it in the trailers. Like it's kind of one of the Barbies played by Margot
mhm,
Robbie, like navigating, gaining awareness, and it's very meta of like gaining her place in the world as a consumer product and toy. So
mhm,
it was very well done, but I've been seeing on social media that like Warner Brothers, after the this movie's been a very huge critical success as it deserves, and a big financial success as well.
mhm.
So now they're like, oh man, like Mattel has all these other great properties like
Uh,
Barney and American Girl dolls and everyone else. And I'm of the same opinion now that I've seen the movie is like, you are learning the very wrong lesson from the
uh-huh.
success of this movie. Like,
Yeah,
don't
and
just start cranking out, toy cinematic universe bullshit. Like, uh,
that's
yeah,
that's kind of gonna be, I imagine it's gonna be the struggle because a lot of the people with the money to make these movies are going to just take the point of this worked in this instance. Let's do that exactly again, as
right.
is so often the case, and that's how we get a ton of just mediocre films coming out until finally they just stop making any money because they've milked them nostalgia out of any any product from that decade.
Yeah, it's like they have to just like wring the towel completely dry of anything to get the last bits of moisture out. That's where I stand in solidarity with the guilds that are on strike right now because uh,
Mhm,
these CEOs are not contributing value to these. I mean, CEOs contribute some value. I'm not saying they contribute zero, but not to where they should be paid more in a day than what someone who's writing or acting makes in a year. That's nonsense. So, because
yeah,
again,
and
it's
that's
almost like an AI could do their job just as good, and neither of them are good. Of being like, oh, this movie Barbie was a huge financial success. Let's make movies for all these different toys, and it's like, no, like this movie was satirizing consumerism and
mhm,
capitalism and gender roles. Like it was a very poignant and well written and very meta movie about like this specific toy and how it has been used as kind of a vehicle for other conversations about stuff in society. Like you really it'd be extremely difficult to replicate with like some other toy IP, if not impossible. So I think that's a terrible idea.
yeah, I agree. Thank you for hitting the mic. But
You've noticed my cat is like leaning against the back of
mhm,
my computer, so it's like
yeah, I've noticed your camera angle just like slowly.
slow as he just gets comfier and comfier against the back of my
Yeah,
computer. Yeah,
but yeah, and I think that's kind of the big takeaway is like if you really want to make a piece of art, get artists
right.
who want to make the art because I think that's kind of the big uh the big important takeaway from also the like the other nostalgia products that are just being kind of thrown out right now. Like Beast Machines is just getting the introduced into the Transformers
Oh yeah.
movies, and I think like Transformers is like the clearest vision of that is you can't just like take a product and throw it at the big screen because it might make some money, but you're gonna end up with a bad product. You're gonna tarnish your like everything to do with that is gonna just like Michael Bay is the butt of so many jokes right now because of
Yep.
the constant streams of bad movies being put out,
Well,
and the Transformers series just kind of is one of the big highlights of that.
well, I have to tread carefully here because my friend Adrian is still holding over my head that at the time in college I enjoyed Transformers Dark of the Moon, and he has never let me forget it the last 15 years.
You know,
Um,
well,
so
it's not a sin to be wrong or to be ignorant. It's a sin to stay ignorant.
Well, I haven't seen that movie in a long time, so I would hope my views have shifted. But I also hide behind the what I think is a valid excuse in that I never played with Transformers growing up and I never watched any of the shows. So
Hmm.
when I went into what was it, 2006 maybe, the first Transformers movie,
Hmm.
um I thought that was a decent movie. I had no context for the story going in, and
Hmm.
again, high school me was like, cool action with I guess the bare minimum of sci-fi.
And I
Yay.
mean, I
And then
can't.
2 and 3 were entertaining to me at that time. Now the third movie came out when I was in college. I've changed a lot since who I was in
Yeah.
college. I don't really enjoy action movies that much anymore. So like I remember as a separate
Hmm.
again, I'm trying to get away from my shame here, but when I was when I was in college, I saw Battle Los Angeles. Do you remember that movie?
Oh my.
Dude,
Yeah.
high school me was like, this is one of the greatest films of all time. I'm embarrassed to
Uh,
say it, but I was like, this movie's fucking awesome. And like, I think a year after it came out, I actually met Michelle Rodriguez, and I had just commissioned in
oh.
the army. So that's what we
Uh-huh.
talked about. I was like, hey, Battle Los Angeles was great. I really liked that movie. I just joined the army, and she was like, oh, and she just told me all about like her modified boot camp she went through to train for that movie. So we
Uh-huh.
just like shot the shit for a bit. She's really cool. I
That's
really like her work.
awesome.
It was really cool, but I went
Yeah.
back and watched that movie like a year or two ago, and I was like, God, what did early 20s me love about this movie? Like, it's just a very generic movie, and like I put on my writer hat too, and I was
Mhm.
like, I could have done this a lot better. So, you know, yeah. So
Yeah.
it's good that
But
people can grow, but I do
yeah,
enjoy
because
that.
like
My friend
I
Rodriguez
can't.
makes fun of me to this day for that
Yeah,
Transformers comment.
I can't fully criticize you because like when I was, what was it, like 9 when I saw the first X-Men movie, with
Did that come out in the 90s?
I if I remember that was 99. I think
Whoa.
that was right around the turn of the millennia.
Oh
Like,
yeah, because people
right.
technically are like Ian McKellen got famous before Lord of the Rings for being Magneto in it. Because I mean, they filmed the Lord of the Rings movies from like '94 to '97, but they didn't release the first one till like 2001 because they kind of filmed them concurrently or something. I think.
I
Fact check
don't.
us, internet. Fact check us.
Yeah, I was just gonna pull that up. So it was 2000 when it came out.
Okay, so they filmed it in the
So
'90s, late '90s.
yeah,
Interesting.
and like it shows. But I
Yeah.
remember liking that movie and X2,
So did
and
I when I
even
saw them when I was younger. I was like, these are cool.
like the first one that I remember like not really caring for is X3.
I was gonna make a joke about that, but you beat me to it. I was gonna be like, well, now
Yeah.
as an adult, we all just agree that X3, X-Men: The Last Stand is the best X-Men movie. I'm just kidding. Please, internet, do not crucify me. That is a
Yeah.
joke. I promise. I'm being sarcastic.
Yeah.
Ratner's a fucking asshole. I had to make a deck on Marvel Snap that featured Phoenix Force, which is not a great card, for like one of the new deck things, and so I just titled the deck "Brett Ratner is an asshole," and that was my. So people, no one can see my deck name when I play it, but it made me laugh. So whatever.
The important thing is that you feel good about it.
I do.
Uh,
I
but
do.
all the black spandex is just very, or
Yeah.
black like leather that everyone was wearing in that movie. Oh,
Yeah.
I tried
No,
to
it's
rewatch
now that
it.
I'm older and I know more about the comics, they were really trying to get away from the comic aesthetic and be a very like modernized, sleek. I
Yeah,
don't know.
it was like it's palpable how embarrassed that they were to be making a comic book movie.
Yeah, that's
Which,
well said. Well said.
which I mean, if you're gonna do that, like just pointing and it's so often they're just pointing a finger and being like, "Oh, well, the comics are stupid," in that very like '90s. Oh, well, we're too cool to like things kind of like ironic point stance that went into the early aughts.
Yeah. Whereas you
Which
can,
I think,
if you want to make a movie based on a comic book arc and make it different aesthetically,
mhm,
if you do it well, no one's gonna care. Like I think Logan is a prime
yeah.
example of that.
Well, I think even better than like for the time, Blade was a much better comic book movie
True.
where they didn't even bring attention to it being a comic book to my recollection. I mean, it's been a little bit since I
Yeah,
watched
I was
that.
pretty young
So.
when the marketing for those was going on, but I do remember it just being
Mhm.
like Wesley Snipes is Blade, fucking jump in. We're hunting vampires, let's go. Uh
Yeah,
like I
like
think maybe on the poster in very small letters in the bottom left it'd be like Marvel Studios or
yeah,
whatever,
and
you
he
know, but
went like they brought in Wesley Snipes, and he went full Wesley Snipes in that,
it's,
and it is amazing in the way that like a movie at that time, only a movie at that time could be. And like I didn't know Blade was a Marvel comic for years after that. Like I loved those Blade movies, and then I didn't come across the Blade comics until several years later. Um, and I think that kind of just goes to show, like, if you make a product that can stand by itself, like you don't need this commercial tie-in or nostalgia
yeah.
to sell it.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with like Werewolf by Night that
Yes.
uh
Great movie.
yeah, that's streaming on Disney Plus that I don't know why Disney didn't like advertise
They didn't market
the
that at all. Like the day it
whole
came out, it
so
was like
poor.
this came out. Like I'd heard of it once from like some industry insiders that I follow who were like, "Oh, they're doing this thing." And then when it came out, I was like, "Oh, it's out." Like they didn't advertise that at all.
Yeah,
And I think in the last couple of years, that's been one of the best MCU things ever. Because
like honestly,
like,
I
have you watched
do.
Secret Invasion?
I haven't yet. I
You
haven't
don't need to. I
I
don't.
haven't been that interested. I still haven't watched uh, the rest of She-Hulk or
Well, that's a whole different discussion we can do, but I wanted to like She-Hulk. I did because there were a bunch of people trashing it before it came out because they were
mm,
like, "You can make a superhero show with a female lead." And I was like, "That's what are you like in elementary school? Like get the fuck out of here." But then
mhm,
there were a few episodes that were really good, and then there were a bunch that were not good. And I was like, no, like I wanted you to be good, but
yeah,
that's a different thing. Secret Invasion has some really cool moments, but um,
mhm,
I think it's the opposite of what you're saying, where you're saying like if you make a quality story with good characters and an interesting
mhm,
plot and you do it well, it doesn't matter if it has existing IP or not to back it up. Secret Invasion is the opposite, where it felt like they were like, this is MCU. We got Nick Fury, who's a cool
mhm,
character. We've got these other characters who have had small roles in other MCU stuff. Let's just make a story. And they didn't have any, there was just no substance there. I mean, it just
yeah,
sucked. And like, I feel like
mm,
the other Marvel, MCU, Disney Plus shows, they all had they had kind of like a two-pronged approach where they were like getting into one or two to three characters really in depth and then also adding something to the universe. Like with
mhm,
WandaVision, it was more about characters, about her and Vision and kind of bringing in some
mhm,
magic to the world and then also setting
oh,
up
yeah,
Monica Rambeau. And then Loki was about a redemption arc for the character of Loki plus introducing you to the Time Variance Authority and Kang. That was both those shows were excellent, and so
mhm,
was Falcon and the Winter Soldier because it helped us get to know Sam Wilson and Bucky Barnes more, but it also
mhm,
really explored the post blip like Earth. So all three of those shows added a lot of nuance and new perspective to the Marvel Cinematic Universe
mhm,
and built up some characters who hadn't been in the limelight as much a ton. Those three were excellent. And then Hawkeye, it had some really good moments, but it was kind of meh. And then Secret Invasion was just like flat, like nothing. And
mhm.
the biggest thing that it added, this is a spoiler alert. Um, do you mind if I give you a spoiler real quick?
I I don't care about spoilers at all.
Okay, good. So for anyone
Spoiler
watching,
alert
skip
for the
this.
internet.
For
So
the
throw up like the
yes,
sirens, a little banner across the screen. There's going to be spoilers.
yes.
Just
Well,
saying.
this is pretty early on in Secret Invasion. Is that they reveal that the Colonel Rhodes that Nick Fury is interacting with is a Skrull impersonating him.
Hmm.
And so at the end, though, because the finale came out a couple days ago, um, it heavily implies that Colonel Rhodes has been a Skrull since the very end of Captain America: Civil War, which means that all through Infinity War and Endgame, it wasn't actually Colonel Rhodes; it was a Skrull impersonating him. And I was like, dude, that ruins like so many of the emotional moments between like him and Tony. And like they also make a big deal of like if you injure a Skrull, it's gonna bleed green. But like Colonel Rhodes got beat up a bit in Avengers 3 and 4 and he was bleeding red blood, so it's either a major inconsistency in the MCU, which they've
Do we
been.
actually see him bleed though? Because he was in the suit.
I read somewhere you do see him at least have like a nosebleed or something. And
Uh,
like, I mean, yeah, in Secret Invasion they make it pretty big. Like they'll kind of like cut
so
someone's arm and see their blood and be like, "Oh, you're a Skrull." Like, so it's
yeah, is
it.
there? I'm trying to think because that he has that moment at the end of Civil War where they're showing him trying to learn to walk again,
Yeah, and so
and
like
that kind of
again, spoiler
undercuts
alert.
that.
Yes, no, at the because in Secret Invasion you learn that some of the Skrulls who are kind of the bad Skrulls, which that's a whole different tangent on why they undermined the entire ending of Captain
Hmm.
Marvel, which pissed me off too. But no, like there's some Skrulls where they're like, we need to make sure that we're impersonating these humans exactly to set up the big invasion. So they've kidnapped these humans. They have them in stasis pods where they can read their memories
Hmm.
and keep them so that there's no duplication. That's just the Skrulls impersonating them. And Colonel Rhodes is one of these. So in the final episode, they rescue him, and he can't walk. Like he doesn't have the thing Tony built for him. So it's like pretty heavy that like, oh, since he got injured in Captain America Civil War, that's when they switched. So the Colonel Rhodes at the end of Civil War is a Skrull, which I was like, okay, if that's correct, that undermines a whole lot of narrative character development. And so I'm curious to see if they double down on that. But yeah, the show just really was very bland. And then the opportunities they had to really have nuance, they just didn't dive into. So I was pretty disappointed with
Yeah, and I
Secret.
think kind of like that's kind of the issue that you run into with a lot of these like bigger budget properties is that they have to be so safe that
Right.
then it's just like, okay, well, instead of doing something new or interesting, let's just add in additional references, like
Hmm.
Secret Invasion being a thing in the comics and like people getting replaced by scrolls. So let's just do that
Yeah.
instead of like bringing out anything interesting. Like, because I think one of the as far as like the television things that I've seen so far, my favorite has been Moon Knight.
Which I still need
Um,
to finish. But yeah, the first couple episodes are really solid. You know, I keep meaning to and I keep forgetting to. I'm probably going to do that tonight actually because my plans changed tonight. So I'll
yeah,
go watch
I'm not
that.
gonna say anything spoilery because I think you
I do
unlike
care
me,
about
you do
spoilers.
care about spoilers,
I do.
but
It
like,
makes me weak.
but yeah, I have so many theories about like where they were going with that show and like what the bigger implication is between that and some of the other uh movies with the divine pantheons in it. So
Okay, then we will
um
follow up on that because,
yeah, like
uh,
it not necessarily in the show itself, but like what that means in the bigger universe. But I'm actually kind of concerned because like with what you're saying about Secret Invasion, I'm wondering if Disney is just kind of not letting not going to be letting their talent go as wild as they have in the past, which is really a shame because I think that just letting your talent kind of perform and talent, I mean not just the actors but like the
writers.
writers and
Mhm.
directors and special effects people, like
Yes.
that's what made Iron Man such a success, and Captain America being like they're like strikingly different films, but they both hit in just their own ridiculous ways. And the way that they fit together, not in any like they have vastly different tones and visual styles and direction, but
Right.
they fit together like comic books do, where you have different artists and different writers,
Mhm.
and yet it all works.
Yeah. Well, and you said it exactly, because up until recently, the reason I've loved the MCU is because you have Kevin Feige overseeing it
Mhm.
and making sure there's no huge continuity discrepancies, but then the movies fixated on different characters all have different writers and directors. So I think that's what really sold me on the MCU with the first Avengers movie was I actually like now that I'm older and a little more appreciative of it, I like the Iron Man trilogy, but initially I wasn't that impressed by the first Iron Man movie. And then I saw Iron Man 2 and I was like, all right. And then I saw Thor, and I that movie was a lot more comedic than I expected, but it also had kind of sci-fi fantasy. I love the first Thor movie. I actually love all of the Thor movies unabashedly. Um, and so when I saw the Thor movie and I saw how that connected to the scene in Iron Man 2 where Agent Coulson's like, I got to go to New Mexico, Land of Enchantment, and then it ties in, I was like, that's neat. So then at the end of Thor, when they were like, he's going to be back in the Avengers, I was like, okay, I'm on board for this because I mean, Thor 1 and Iron Man 1 and 2 could not be more different films. And then the first Captain America was pretty cool. And I was like, okay,
Mhm.
so then all these characters coming into an entirely new thing where they're bringing flavors from the other movies, but then having team ups and then splitting up and coming back, that was great. And I'm just concerned now that I kind of like to circle back to what I was saying about Barbie, how the movie was excellent and
Mhm.
then the studio's like, well, cool, let's do a bunch of stuff with other toys. It's like that's not why people liked it, you know. And I think
Yeah.
that's with Marvel when they started expanding to like the Netflix shows with the Defenders. Those were excellent, but then they didn't really bring them in or give it a purpose to
Mhm.
the overall MCU. So it kind of
Yeah.
lost its luster, you know. And lately I am starting to unfortunately feel for the first time in the MCU, and some people would probably say they felt it earlier, but I'm feeling more of a quantity versus quality, which is
Mhm.
making me sad because again,
Yeah.
I feel like my bar is a little low because I like to be entertained and have fun, but um, pretty much up until Endgame, I wasn't feeling
Yeah.
quantity over quality. I felt like it was all
And
pretty quality. Like it wasn't like anything exceptional, but it was pretty solid quality all across. Whereas now, like Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, I thought the way they dealt with Chadwick Boseman's death was really profound and really well written. But then the main plot with Namor just didn't really work for me, and so that movie I was kind of like, eh. And then Ant-Man 3 and Guardians of the Galaxy 3 to me were massively disappointing. I went in looking forward to both movies so much, and I thought they were both just terrible. Um, and so I've been really concerned about the MCU since those two movies. I'm excited for the Marvels because I really liked Captain Marvel.
Mhm.
Secret Invasion didn't set up anything cool for that, which I expected it would. But I'm excited to see Monica Rambeau since WandaVision. I haven't seen Miss Marvel, but I've heard a lot about her performance. I think she's going to shine in the movie, and I'm really hoping
Yeah.
it'll be good to kind of get the taste of Ant-Man 3 and Guardians of the Galaxy 3 out of my
I
mouth.
still
But
need to watch the rest of Miss Marvel. I watched the first couple of episodes and I was like, oh my God,
yeah,
like
well, I watched the
this
first
is
episode and it seemed good. It just seemed like it wasn't for me as a 32-year-old man. I was like, it's not bad. It's just it's not really engaging to me, you know.
See, I saw it and I was like, this is the show for my sister.
Yeah.
Who like if you knew my sister, like you'd understand. Um,
And is she younger? She's in her 20s, I imagine, or
she's younger than me,
yeah.
but crap, my sister, she's got to be in her 30s now, right? I'm in my 30s.
We're all destined to be in our 30s.
Everybody's 30 now.
No.
Oh,
Um,
your little brother 30? I'm trying to remember how old
yeah,
this
my little brother's
was
gonna be
at
30
different
this
times.
year. Oh my goodness, that's weird.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
So now that we feel old, the other property that's getting to the point where I'm concerned it's just,
it's gonna I,
and
it's gonna collapse
actually,
like a dark star and just turn to a black
yeah,
hole.
I was gonna say like Star Wars is going down that road of
I
quality,
don't know. Andor
quantity
was
over quality, but
incredible. Star Wars
actually,
still has
I'm
lifeblood in it.
thinking.
Andor was the best.
Mhm. I'm actually thinking Star Wars is getting the opposite effect, and I think it's actually benefiting from the quantity over quality that for from Disney because I think Star Wars really shines where like you have to kind of rush these things and not overthink it. Because I think
Hmm.
the thing with Star Wars is it's kind of nonsensical, and you just kind of need this suspension of disbelief to just kind of like this, like, we're going to tell this story, and we're just going to kind of like have fun with it in a way. And like, you can have fun with it in a few different ways, but I think like when you see like episode 7, 8, 9, where they put a ton of money into it to try to make it like this big ridiculous production with this huge message, and like try to get every like squeeze everything in there, like those, like it just doesn't work with Star Wars. But when you have like,
Ah, there we go.
when you're trying to get like a TV series out there with little to no like recognition for any of the characters, like the Mandalorian, then suddenly like that's the Mandalorian first season is just absolutely like perfect for Star Wars. I feel like that is peak Star Wars in my opinion, and I know you're a huge Star Wars guy,
Yeah,
and
which is why
you're
I
going to have a very
partially,
different perspective than me. But
well, I just partially disagree with your take on that in that the budget thing, because I
mhm,
definitely think that 7, 8, and 9 were heavily detracted by having massive budgets and
mhm,
correspondingly high expectations from Disney.
yeah,
And they were definitely trying to be safe and mass appeal to the point where it hurt them.
mhm,
Um, and so I do think that a lot of Star Wars, because it is such a fun fantasy world, it does get away with, like you said,
yeah,
having a very much like suspension of disbelief and just jump in. But I feel like Andor really broke the expectations for it
mhm,
because Andor is actually the highest budget of all of the shows. Like
mhm.
I think the first season of Andor cost more than all 3 seasons of The Mandalorian because
Oh, I'm sure. And like
because it
as
was
they go
all
on,
on
like
location and
the budgets are just getting inflated, but it's not necessarily about just and I don't mean to imply it's not just about having the money. Like you can put as much money into any project as you want, and that's not going to determine the quality of it. What I meant is like having the like, how do I put this? Uh, Just ignore me. Make your You should make your
okay.
point because I'm going to take a second.
Yeah, you're good.
My brain start working.
Well, no, I think like you said, first season of The Mandalorian was excellent Star Wars, where it was logical and poignant and character driven enough to really grab more adult audiences, but it was also fun and whimsical enough to grab younger audiences, and everyone can kind of enjoy it equally.
Mhm.
Whereas I feel like Andor was it was like you said, like it had a message and it was very like purposeful in that, and so I don't know. I guess kind of. I forgot where I was going to with this, but I think the thing I love about Star Wars is that it is a crazy big universe, and
Mhm.
that you can have a really diverse set of stories and different tones within that. So, like, I mean, there's a TV show called Star Wars Resistance, I think,
Mhm.
which I haven't seen. That one's very much more like kid oriented, and I saw the commercials and I was like, this isn't for me. But I like that it
Is it
exists.
Resistance or Rebels?
Well, yeah, Rebels I felt like
Mhm.
had some really good episodes, but overall it
Mhm.
was way too kid oriented. So I didn't enjoy Rebels as much as a lot of people
Yeah.
did. It was still decent, and I'm excited to see a lot of those characters back in the Ahsoka show. But
Yeah.
no, I like that we can have this big universe where you have stories like Resistance and Rebels, and then you also have Andor, which was just like incredibly good and nuanced and like I would make the argument that even if you're not a Star Wars fan, checking out Andor is like it's just solid. Like this is a really
Yeah.
good show. So I'm not an Andor nerd at all. I'm not a
Yeah.
big
I
Andor
can
sim.
see
This
that if
that
you're.
yeah
I
no
don't know
that's
which
I don't know
which
where
one
this
you're
is
on,
coming
but
from at all. But you know
yeah. But I think what I'm trying to get at, as I just kind of ruminate on my point there for a second, it's the pretentiousness where like episode, and it's not just 7, 8, 9, it's 1, 2, and 3 as well, where it tried to be Star Wars tried to become this like very like profound and very pretentious, um, iconic thing, and you can't, like, that's not something that you can manufacture. And like the first, like, 4, 5, 6 were that, like, they ended up being that, like, that
Man, I got a
profound
cat nibbling on
cultural
a
touchstone
camera cord.
that
Stop, Haru.
a lot of the other Star Wars, the bad Star Wars stuff, are trying to imitate. But when you have something like The Mandalorian or Andor, it doesn't come across of, we're trying to be this like pretentious thing with this deep ridiculous lore that has to be reflected in every moment, and every episode has to be catering to every facet of everything. And we need to have that, like, we need this female character to fill this role, and we need this character to fill this role, and we need this person, and we need this exact role. When instead you're like, you have a story in a universe, and you just assume that everyone's just going to accept that, it's, they're going to just suspend their disbelief and be like, okay, it's in the Star Wars universe. There's magic, there's laser swords, there's robots. Gotcha. And then you take your story that you want to tell, and you tell that story. That ends up being a much bigger thing than trying to like make a Tolkien epic every single time you're trying to do anything. Because I with like episodes 4, 5, and 6, like, those aren't really epic stories when you look at them. Like, the writing's not even particularly good on in that original trilogy. It doesn't, the production, like the practical effects, amazing.
Yeah,
But like, by today's standard, like, it they look
I think they've
cheap.
aged very well.
Yeah, no, well, they aged
If you watch
well.
it with other movies from around that decade, it's like, whoa, these look incredible.
Yeah, no, and like,
But
they
I
look.
think the writing was actually, like you said, the writing on the first three Star Wars movies is nothing groundbreaking. But I think that they were smart in that they
Mhm,
took a lot of established mythology and stories that had influenced other stories
mhm.
for many many years because they're very
Oh,
have
for
very
sure.
relatable values and themes. So they just kind of took that and were like, hey, we're going to put these very relatable universal themes into our story, and that's why combining that with the groundbreaking practical effects, uh,
Mhm.
to where, like, I mean, my first
Yeah,
memory as a human is watching episode 4 as a kid, and it's just like
and it,
being like my
yeah,
imagination just like
no,
unlocked.
and that type of like simplified storytelling, because the thing that the original Star Wars does really well is just assumes that you're going to like get it. Like, there's a whole lot of things with like the monomyth and the hero with 1,000 faces,
Absolutely.
where
Yeah,
like
Joseph Campbell, I
they
think, is the
they
author of that.
yeah,
Like George Lucas has said, he literally like read that, and that was a big
yeah,
inspiration.
and
Yeah,
there's a ton of like spaces where they just don't tell any story here, because they just assume you're just gonna fill in that gap, because like there's a ton of other stories. Like, they never tell you that what happened to Luke's parents in that movie. They just assume you're going to be like, okay, he had parents. They're not there.
right.
He lives with his aunt and uncle. We don't need the 10 years of backstory on this character. Like,
I like
oh,
that
of
it's there,
course,
though. I like
yeah.
that it's
And
there.
then there's a wizard that lives in the desert, and they're just like, oh, uh, like, he gets the message of, oh, hey, wizard, I need somebody to save me. Oh, that kind of sounds like the name of that wizard that lives out in the desert. Let's go
Might be
give this
talking about
to
old
him.
Ben.
Yeah.
I actually really like that, and I
That's,
like though that you have this kind of initial story that's very relatable to everyone, and then tangential to that, you can tell all these different stories that are
yeah,
relatable to different
no,
groups of people. I
and
like that.
that's the strength that I'm talking about, where it's not like pretentious constantly trying to fill in the backstory of every single tree that you go in, which
Right.
I mean, that's what I mean
Which
with like
I think the
Tolkien does
only
that.
thing that fell into pretension was episode 7, 8, 9.
Yeah,
Because they were like, we need to be the original series, but again, modern. And then they just
yeah,
fumbled like
no,
every
yeah,
aspect of doing that, you know?
yeah, and well, that's the thing. It's like we have to explain everything and make everything like super. And I don't want to like say that they wanted to make everything super woke, but they're like we want to do this, but we want to do it with like modern values, and we want to specifically cater this to everything going on with the moment of like what's going on right now with discourse, and
Well,
that's the thing.
I think if you do
Mhm.
that well, it works. Because I think Andor does do that well. Like, have you seen Andor, by the way, before we're,
I haven't
oh,
finished it,
you,
but yeah,
I feel like Andor is very timely because that's the thing is that I
I
I think that Star Wars has always been fairly progressive. It's never been
oh yeah,
perfect, but
no,
it's
for
been,
sure.
yeah, I think George Lucas, when he was running the show, was definitely trying to comment on either current things or things that had happened in recent history. Um, and
I'm
so people who have taken over Star Wars have tried to do that. And I think it's not so much that I don't, in the new trilogy, I feel like they weren't progressive enough and they also just did everything badly. So it's not that they were
yeah,
trying to do it. I mean, again, I think they were trying to do a mass appeal thing. And it's kind of like that disingenuous wokeness from a
yeah,
corporation where
we're
they're going to be like, hey, we support you. And it's like, do you though? Or are you just trying
yeah,
to take my
we're
money? You know?
they're just the thing is it came
Or it's
off.
like Andor was very heartfelt. Very
Mhm.
little about
No,
episode 7, 8,
and
9 felt
yeah,
heartfelt from the writing producing standpoint, you know?
no, and I agree with Andor, and I agree with the original. Like, and I'm sure there was like very specific things that Lucas wanted to tell with the original trilogy,
Yeah.
but the thing is, when you're, it's not necessarily specific to anything. It's addressing these things by addressing th- things thematically and generally, instead of like trying to make a very specific uh like a specific comment about a specific point in time. And so the original trilogy, it's in the same way that I feel like Andor, it's kind of like it's timely, but it's timeless as well, because these are like it's hitting themes, not specific events. Whereas I feel like episodes 7, 8, and 9 are they're just waving a flag of hey, we support the thing right now, instead of trying to make like larger general topics.
What's an
And I think
example of that though in 7, 8, and 9? Because I'm critical of them for like just not being good movies. But
yeah,
like, what are some examples of them being non-thematic and like too on the nose? I'm trying to think of concrete examples.
well, so with the what was that, 8, where
The
you
Last
have
Jedi, my favorite Star Wars movie.
that's the one where you have Commander Purple Hair that does the suicide charge at the end, right?
Yep. Which
Okay,
was a very problematic storyline in my opinion.
for a lot of reasons, because like
Well, I think the reason honestly was first off, you've got Admiral Akbar there. You give him an off-screen death. He would if he had done the same thing and been like, it's a trap and turned his old thing on the nose and just rammed that ship in there, that would have been awesome.
yes,
But I
no,
still think
and
it
I think that would have been great. And there's ways like that would have been a great way to handle
well,
that.
because with some people with the character of I think it's Admiral Holdo is the character because she was like
Her name
withholding
doesn't.
well,
Yeah.
she was withholding a bunch of information from Oscar Isaac's character Poe Dameron, and a lot of people made it like a commentary on gender roles, which I don't think if that was the intention, it was stupid. And if it wasn't the intention and you're having that analysis, I don't really get it. I think
Mhm.
it just didn't make sense because whatever they were going for, which I don't want to speculate on, it just didn't make sense to the characters. So like
I do want to
even
speculate on that, because I feel like I saw the movie and I felt like, yeah, this is like I felt like they were definitely trying to make a comment about gender roles in that from like my takeaway from the movie.
And
I
if
also thought,
they did it poorly, so it
yes,
didn't come
no, I
off.
think they did it very poorly. I think
So if you want a movie that
they
comments
did
on gender
the
roles well, Barbie was
yeah.
excellent. Highly
No, and I
recommend.
think honestly, like you had multiple people on that ship that could have filled in the role of Holdo, and instead they introduced an entirely new character that added in like we have no reason to trust this character. We have no reason to think that this character is competent. We just are getting told to like uh oh, trust the process, and then we get to the end of oh well you didn't trust the process, and it's just like
Well, I think regardless of, like you said though, I do think if we had a character who we'd already established, or they just did a better job of bringing in a
mm-hmm,
new character and quickly establishing, here's how we want you to feel about this character. I mean, that's just kind
mm-hmm,
of like basic writing. But I think
yeah,
the gender thing, if that's what they were going for, it's a weird way to do it because
I think it
regardless of Holdo's gender
mm-hmm,
though, the way that like it just didn't make sense in the universe, like her not
yeah.
sharing information with the other people there, like it wasn't logical in the flow
Yeah,
of the story.
no, I agree wholeheartedly. The entire character was not like
I think the
served
acting was
little
fine. I just
purpose.
think she was a poorly written character.
Yeah, the
What's her
whole
name, Laura
I
Dern?
think
She's a great actress though. I mean, she did fine in the role.
yeah, I nothing bad about the actress. I think the actress did uh, a fine job with what she was given. I think that
Which
just
I still don't understand. Every other Ryan Johnson movie I've seen has been excellent. So I don't know how he wrote and directed episode 8 and how so many people greenlit that because I just don't
and
understand.
yeah, and the like the bigger issue there is like they tried to make you feel like hit specific feelings at specific points, and you could hear like I was watching that in the theater, and like you hear the music surge at specific points, but I feel nothing for these characters because there's
Because it
no
wasn't well
reason for
written.
me to be at all invested because like it's trying to tell you what to feel instead of making you feel that. And I
Yeah,
feel
so
like
lazy
it
writing. Yeah, I
yeah,
agree.
no, it was like it felt very lazy writing, and it
Yeah.
felt, and I mean it that's typical for what's his face that produced that movie. He
J.J. Abrams actually was not involved in that movie.
was he not involved in that? It
Nope.
felt like a J.J. Abrams movie where J.J. Abrams wants you to think there's something deeper there, and then there's just not.
Which, admittedly, I am a fan of many properties that J.J. Abrams is involved with. I think when he's producing, you get pretty good stuff.
Mhm.
Sometimes when he's directing, but with writing, not so much. So that's
Yeah,
my opinion on J.J. Abrams. But no, so J.J. Abrams co-wrote, or he might have co-written or not written at all episode 7, but he directed it and then he produced it as well, but Kathleen Kennedy oversaw it, and she
mhm.
oversees everything Star Wars, so
Yeah.
her batting record's pretty
Unfortunately,
solid. I think she's done great overall.
I disagree.
I think she's done great.
I'm
Well, because she worked with George Lucas back when he ran Lucasfilm, so
I
pretty
don't
smooth
care.
transition. I think
See,
she's
I
done
don't
fine.
care about like I don't care about the history or like what you've done before the project because like we're not dealing with something where your history is what makes the difference. Like your history can get you the job, but that doesn't affect like the actual product that you make.
Yeah, but I mean, if we're gonna start saying when Kathleen Kennedy's been in charge, what she's given us, Mandalorian, Andor, Solo, Rogue One, like
I was
those will make up for the sequel trilogy in my opinion. Because again, the 7, 8, and 9 are like I thought. I have my whole qualms with 7, 8, and 9 in that they're not my favorite Star Wars, but compared to the things she's given us, I'm like, yeah, you can take a few misses and that's okay. So I'm still a Kathleen Kennedy fan overall. She's got a thumbs up for me. So
yeah, and I mean, and to be fair though, she is the producer, so she's gonna have only so much influence over the full product, and there's a huge uh swath of different factors that are going to go into uh any production, and you're just a piece of the pie there.
Yeah,
Um,
I would argue that she's a pretty important. I mean, look at the Han Solo movie, which I think is excellent. I think really the only people who really dropped the ball on that are the marketing team, which is why
see,
it's the only Star Wars movie that hasn't turned or that wasn't like a box office success.
yeah.
But
See, I actually
she,
dislike.
you didn't like it?
I did not like Solo.
What? Okay, well,
Yeah,
I thought it was excellent, and
I thought it
I was
was.
initially very concerned when Kathleen Kennedy, it seems like, made the decision to let go Phil Lord and Chris Miller. I think the two who are responsible for Across the Spider Verse, which great movie.
Mhm,
Um, it turns out recently that they're not great to work with as animators, but that's a different subject. But um, when they were doing a Han Solo movie, I was interested and curious, and then they
mhm.
filmed most of the movie, and she made the. It sounds like again, I'm speculating. I wasn't in the room with that, but it sounds like she made the difficult decision to fire them, rehire. What's his name? Who
Mhm.
directed it? And he came in, and they had to reshoot a lot of that movie. Like it was very costly, but I think it ended up being excellent. So I am very happy she made that call. Because I really like the Solo movie. I wish it would get a sequel or a spin-off show. It sounds like a spin-off show focusing on Lando. I heard, I need to verify this still, that Donald Glover actually took on writing duties for that show, and I was like, that's exciting because
See,
anything that
and
man touches turns to gold. So I'm very
yes,
excited.
and I'm very very excited then to hear that, because this is the first I've heard of that. And if
It's a pretty recent thing I read
yeah,
online from a fairly reputable source, if I'm remembering.
and
So
yeah, and this might be just kind of my personal thing, but I'm much more likely to uh like be excited for a specific writer than a specific producer. And not to say that I don't think producers have an effect on the work, but I think it's definitely, if you have certain writers or um certain actors, their effects tend to be much more profound.
as a producer, I agree with you because, well, I feel like on the things I've produced, I've haven't had much impact on the creative aspects,
Mhm.
whereas writers, directors, and actors absolutely bring a lot more
Yeah,
to the table.
and
So I do agree with you on
but
that.
also, like, that's not the producer's job, is not to be the creative type, and
Right.
like these are like works of art, and as an artist myself, I will be the first to admit that like artists are not always the best at working on a timeline if left to their own devices,
Right.
and
Well, and
so
that's
I.
where it's especially like, I mean, I've done, producing on indie movies, but and that's a
Mhm,
separate thing. But like, someone like Kathleen Kennedy, she has to kind of oversee continuity in the universe, kind of like Kevin Feige with the MCU. It's like continuity, overall cohesion, big
mhm,
direction, marketing, business models. Like it's a lot of very non-creative stuff to be balancing. So it
mhm.
is a job I
Yeah,
wouldn't want. I sure
yeah,
wouldn't want to do that,
yeah.
especially for
I
Star Wars
guess,
or Marvel, something where
yeah.
a lot of
I
people
guess
care
where
a
that
whole lot.
that tangent kind of got us is I shouldn't blame Kathleen Kennedy for what I don't like about Star Wars, but that also does mean that I shouldn't give her credit for the things that I do like about Star Wars. Aside from,
Touche,
I will
touche.
give
Yep.
her credit for, there's a ton of Star Wars stuff that's come out, and like as a producer, like she definitely deserves a ton of credit for that, because yeah, that definitely would fall upon the producer. So uh I guess I'm
If you're
sorry,
watching
Kathleen
Kathleen
Kennedy.
Kennedy,
I'm sorry, I shouldn't be so harsh. You're doing a great job getting Star Wars stuff made, and I should be
because
much
she's
more critical
definitely
of her.
watching. She's definitely watching our
Absolutely.
podcast.
One of the three people listening.
Will, this has been like our most epic tangential deep dive ever.
Yes, this is a very long 3 minutes
Yeah, this was
talking
originally
about
intended to
Barbie.
be a 3-minute thing.
Mm,
Um, I've had a blast. This has been awesome.
yep.
Because we referenced Barbie, I want to edit this and get it out ASAP. So I think I'm actually going to go do that now.
Yeah. Uh, you want to just
What are last thoughts? Or
yeah.
do you have a quick draw question that we can dive into to kind of cap it off with something completely random?
Um, well, if we have something just quick to tie it around, and like we could edit like a 2 or 3 minute like short of just like skip the middle and just end with Barbie and just bookend it, and then post the full video. And the full video has almost nothing to do with Barbie.
Yes. So the Barbie movie was excellent. Go see it. Actually, our friend Tanner
Mhm.
Cairns, who was on the podcast, he has a very small appearance in Barbie, so that was exciting.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Friend
yeah.
of the friends.
Friend of the friends, yeah, friend of the nerds and friends. So
Yeah.
shout out to
So
Tanner. If you want to check out Tanner Cairns' book Run program, here's a link to the episode where we interview Tanner. And then also Issa Rae was in it, who was in Across the Spider Verse, and I worked with her on the HBO show Insecure. I drew a blank on the title for a minute, but I was a PA on that. So
as a movie review, don't you need a pneumatic score to place how a any particular property is ranked? Isn't that how we handle everything in our culture?
wait, what? You lost me.
Uh, a number. Pneumatic is not actually. For those that are wondering, pneumatic means air powered. I was making a joke. But
The joke went over my
numerical
head.
score, yeah.
Oh,
Uh,
like
like a number from one to let's
for Barbie, I would say 10 out of
666.
10, no notes. For Barbie,
Oh,
I'd say 10 out of 10, no notes. I could never come up with something that well done. So
okay.
yeah, no, 10 out of 10, no notes. Greta Gerwig's a rock star. From now on, I will watch anything she's attached to.
Hmm,
That's how good
good
it
for
was.
you.
Yeah. Well, because
Oh,
on Monday when I saw Oppenheimer, I was like, this is the best movie I've seen in a theater all year. And then I saw
and then
Barbie,
you
and
saw
this was
Barbie.
better. So I guess now Barbie is the best movie I've seen in a theater all year. So
Sweet.
10 out of 10, no notes.
Well,
Because whereas Oppenheimer would have been like 9.5 out of 10, where I had like some teeny tiny nitpicky notes, but overall,
mhm.
excellent movie.
Well, we didn't even get into the tangent of how I don't like what's his face movies. The director of
You don't
Oppenheimer.
like Christopher Nolan movies?
No, I don't.
Wait,
Talk about pretentious.
wait. So, okay, I have a very unpopular opinion where I love all of Christopher Nolan's movies, except I hate his most popular three. And so I want to see if our
You don't like The
opinion.
Dark Knight.
They're trash. They're not good movies.
So I agree that the Batman Begins is trash, and
I feel like Batman Begins is the best of the three.
oh
It's not good, but it's not
no,
bad. Whereas I feel like 2 and 3 are just nothing.
I think three is
Dark
not
Knight
very good.
Rises.
Dark Knight Rises, like it's memeable, like
You mean
it's
if
fun
I?
only because you're going to be laughing at the Bane voice
Yeah, I was about to make a
the
joke
entire
also.
time. Like
Yeah,
Tom Hardy stole that whole movie.
and I don't know. This is. I mean, every time I bring
Yeah.
it up, I get just crucified online for saying I hate. I just the Dark Knight. I feel like so for me, all of Christopher Nolan's other movies, I feel like they are very well done, very like intellectual and make you think and have
Mhm.
really concise tones and stories. And I feel like the three Dark Knight movies just kind of jump all over the place, and they're just like I'm like okay, Batman exists. I don't care. And like
See,
I feel like and again, people hate me for saying this. I mean, Heath Ledger's a good actor, and like he did okay as the Joker, but I just didn't care. Like he wasn't an interesting villain, and they fixated on him so much. And Harvey Dent, played by Aaron Eckhart, I think is the name, much
uh-huh.
more interesting character, and he was like sidelined.
See, I disagree with your take on The Dark Knight, but I think that's probably one of the better Christopher Nolan films. I don't think, in general, like I find his movies to be incredibly pretentious, and they feel like somebody like they feel like they're purposefully made for like a film school professor.
I disagree because like I don't like pretentious movies either, so I'm surprised because like my favorite Christopher Nolan movie is The Prestige. Have you seen that?
I have seen The Prestige. That's up there with one of my like. I think that
That's a
is
great
the best
movie.
Christopher Nolan movie.
Okay, so we agree
Like,
on that one. I think
yeah,
second is Interstellar. I fucking love Interstellar.
I did not like Interstellar.
What?
That was another movie where I found it to be wholly pretentious and
I
like
think it's excellent science
it
fiction.
was fine. Like it's fine. It kind of like it it feels like it wants to be deeper than it actually is, and I feel like a lot of Christopher Nolan movies are that way, where they're like, this is such like a deep and metaphoric topic, and then we're just gonna like they're just they're fine.
Huh.
Like like
Agree to I found
Inception as well.
I found
I think
Interstellar to be incredibly poignant. I don't Inception wasn't like super like it didn't get into any groundbreaking topics, but I thought it was a very fun, unique movie. It's absolutely a heist movie, but because it's a dream
yeah.
heist, I was like, that's cool. I like
Yeah,
Inception a lot.
like
Great movie.
it has a thing that makes it a little like it has an interesting idea and then it tries to uh it I feel like it just kind of it feels like somebody who is telling me that this is a really deep and thoughtful and insightful movie, and then
That's
I'm
fascinating because I feel the
not
opposite.
actually. I never
Where
get that from any Christopher Nolan movies. It's the same thing
really,
with like in not just Inception, like Tenet, where
well, Tenet
Tenet,
wasn't his best movie. I
yeah, it's also like the dumb sci-fi thing that they
I
come up with
I actually
plot
think
device
Tenet
for
was
that
very
movie
smart sci-fi.
particularly.
It just wasn't. I think that's one of his
I
weakest
don't.
screenplays. I just think it wasn't well written to explore that idea well. So I
I
wanted to
agree
like
that it
Tenet.
wasn't written to explore the idea very well. I also don't think the idea is nearly as interesting as it first presents itself to be.
I think it was. I think that it was just kind of a an inaccessibly written screenplay, so it wasn't excellent. But what
And
do you think of Memento? I love that movie. That's a great written movie.
um,
Tattoos all over him, can't remember anything. Have you not seen Memento?
I don't. I'm sure I did.
That's Christopher Nolan's first like big movie, and it's excellent with Guy Pearce and
I'm trying to remember
Joey
anything about the
Pantoliano from The
movie
Matrix,
because
Carrie Ann Moss from The Matrix, small town Las or Nevada, I think it's set. He has no short term memory, and the whole movie's backwards. It's fucking brilliant. You should check it out. Memento's
I
very
might
good.
have to like. I'm sure I watched it at some point, but because that's always on the list of like big movies, and I'm sure I've at some point I had to have watched
Like
it,
I
but
like it because it's
I
not a
don't
big
remember
movie.
a thing
It was a
about
very
it.
low
I
budget
think
movie, but it's incredibly well done. But
well, I'll have to go and watch it or potentially rewatch it because I don't remember that. Which I mean, I don't know.
well, Will,
I
this has been a very fun discussion. Thank you for having this with me. I've had a blast.
oh to wrap up, uh,
Yes,
childhood product from like Connects needs a movie. We have the Lego movie, we've had the Barbie movie. I'm bringing us back to the first topic so we can stitch this together and pretend
I like it. That it's
that
a giant quick draw that grew out of control rapidly. And
yes, yeah,
well, Connects
to bring us back.
who owns Connects? Is that a Mattel or a Hasbro? What is that?
Uh,
Well, whoever it is, we decided to make a movie of it first on our podcast, so you have to hire Will and me as consultants now. That's just internet
yeah.
law. Sorry.
Oh, and it makes sense because then you can have a movie about building creatively, and since there's no like connects, it's all just pieces to be put together. It could be like some sort of puzzle movie or some sort of thriller, and you get to the end, and then everything makes sense, you know.
So you're saying that we should get M Night Shyamalan to do it?
Or a good director.
Right.
I mean, how
Uh,
directors? He has like one good movie, right?
I liked Signs.
Yeah, I liked Signs at the time. We're gonna go on a whole different tangent if we don't stop.
I need to stop. We could talk about M Night Shyamalan all day. So, well, this has been the most I've laughed in a hot minute. So thank you, Will. I'm gonna go and
Absolutely.
get this posted ASAP. But
Yeah.
thank you for another great tangent on Nerds and Friends. We really should change our podcast name to Nerds and Tangents. Well, we'll put a plug in that for now before we go on a tangent about it.
Yes, need to
All right.
design
Well,
a new logo now.
yes,
Where
get to work.
it's all corners.
It's all. That's okay. That's awesome. I love that.